Hey, what's up YouTube? We're back with another video today, and we're going to be discussing Helldivers, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I've been seeing a lot of discussion in the community, and I wanted to throw my input into the ring and just talk about what my thoughts are on the game, where it's going, things that I feel like are growing in the community as far as like points of contention and points of frustration. Just talk about it, see if we can get an open dialogue with the devs about it, and keep the conversation going, because I think it's important to talk about this stuff rather than just like hear only one perspective, anything like that. So let's get into it. The first part that I wanted to address is just what they're doing good. What is good about Helldivers and how it's progressed from start to now. We're about a year and a half in, a little bit more than that, closing in on 2 years. And, I just wanted to retrospectively look back and see what has worked and what hasn't. And my first point, I think very obviously would just be how cinematic the game has continued to be. And we've been moving in a direction of even more cinema as time has gone on, as far as Meridia and the Hive worlds and just mega cities and caves. They've done a fantastic job with adding that. Fantastic. And I think it would be hard to say otherwise. The game continues to look great and sound great and just do a really good job at improving that. So hats off to that. Monetization has continued to be good. From many people's perspective, it's a shining example of monetization done right. I do have a little bit of a worry of when you stare at the Warbond screen, you start to see this many Warbonds as a new player. It could be a bit overwhelming. I'm hoping they have some kind of system in mind about hey, maybe making Warbonds that came out 2 years ago, they start to bundle together and become essentially half price, just to reduce the amount of this that is going on. I don't think it's immediate needs to be changed, but it's something that I hope that they're at least looking into it, because it is a good monetization structure. Even the legendary Warbonds, which are more expensive and don't include super credits, I still think are good additions to the game as far as the cosmetic side. You don't need them by any means. They don't really offer any utility, but for the people of those franchises that enjoy the cosmetic side, that's great. I will be talking about more about cosmetics later. Just hold on though. Another one that I'd like to talk about is Xbox. If you asked me a year ago, would Xbox be included in this game? No. I was pretty firmly saying that I don't think they would add Xboxes under this game's umbrella. I didn't. I really didn't. As far as the console wars were going and stuff like that, it's a Sony exclusive game. I thought it would just be PC and PlayStation, but that surprised me. And there's some problems with the Xbox launch. We'll get into that a little bit later, but I think overall they've impressed me in that regard. I never saw that coming. So somehow twisting Sony's arm to be able to do that, still mind-blowing. I also want to take a moment before we get into proper critiquing and stuff like that of the game to talk about how the developers have changed the game immensely from where we originally started off. The game originally had a lot less power fantasy in it, I think is a good way of explaining it. There was a lot less individual power. There's a lot more team power and limited amounts of stratagem power and stuff like that. And since then, we've gotten the 60-day update and just constant patches in 2025 of just elevating our stratagems. Look at Sentries. Sentries started off good, don't get me wrong, but they are in a whole other ballpark now as far as how effective they are on the battlefield. And especially with just cooldown reduction, it's massive. It's insane. If you look at where we were to where we are now, they have changed direction. They've listened a lot to the community that has adopted the game. They started off with a very different game, and I think a very different idea of what kind of game they wanted to make, and they've changed it to be more power fantasy, more solo power oriented. And some people like that, some people hate that. I've definitely seen both discussions on that side of the fence. Hopefully they can continue to keep the game interesting in terms of difficulty, while not giving us too much power that we just obliterate our competition. But I think overall they're doing a fantastic job at just making us feel powerful. The last one I want to talk about was Warbonds. This time last year, basically, we were having a bit of a conundrum with Viper Commandos coming out and just being not that interesting a Warbond and having a lot of bugs and problems in general. But since then, we've had a lot of really good Warbonds that have amazing theming that has been amazing, and in general having interesting things that have changed changed the game immensely and how you like build your loadout. I always describe Helldivers as like a sandbox, and you just have a bunch of toys that you can use to play inside that sandbox. And the game shines the brightest when you have many toys to pull from and to do interesting things with. The toy might not be the most meta choice, but at least it's very interesting to take that over something else possibly. So I have to applaud them for like actually turning around and making some like really good Warbonds of the last year. Way more interesting than like previous ones that were definitely much bigger letdowns than anything. Overall, I do think the game is fantastic, but there are issues that I want to talk about that are starting or actually just have been around for a long time. Like some of these have just been around since the beginning of the game, and I just feel like they need to have more shine on them. The next segment will be more on like, these are immediate things that need to be focused on for the health of the game. So to crack into it, these are things that I feel need to be addressed, but they're not dire at this like given time. Like they need to like be super expedite on it. These are things that like I've seen stacking up over time, and just things that would help the game be more liked, I think, by many, and just would increase playability over long periods of time. The first one I want to talk about, and I think overall they do a good job on, but needs to be addressed, would be like the balance of weapons, more specifically primary, but it does include stratagems of just how they are balanced across the board as far as like durability, durable damage, and just light pen versus medium pen. There's been so much discussion lately, especially after the Coyote was added and the Rupture String was added, light pen versus medium pen. Personally, I haven't felt like it has been like tugging at me like super bad, but the addition of the Rupture Strain has definitely put way more of a spotlight on it. And I can agree that like a faction that is like very much medium pen or higher focused demands the attention of like the balance team, because it's like, why would you bring a light pen weapon in that scenario? You'd have to absolutely bring an explosive weapon or some kind of support weapon in that case to deal with them, and it just primary weapons that are light pen just don't feel any good at all. But the other perspective is that light pen tends to be the accuracy dependent medium of the game. If you have a lot of accuracy, if you're good at hitting weak points, if you know where to shoot, tends to be the best case for them. But even then, still sometimes they just get completely overshadowed by the medium pen, just because when you're shooting a light pen weapon at light pen armor, you're actually just getting a straight up decrease in damage. And the medium pen weapon, although it technically does less damage, it ends up doing more damage in the long run, which is, it just feels awkward. And a lot of times the medium pen weapons have more durable damage, which is very impactful to gameplay. So it just feels a bit awkward. Now, I do think there's an exception, and I voice this towards the developers, and I really hope that they listen to this. The amendment is awesome. It's my favorite weapon in the game. I know that sounds so weird, but I love this weapon. Damage-wise, it's incredibly similar to the counter sniper, both raw damage and durable. It has better ergonomics. You're looking at like 50 ergonomics depending on the scope. It'll go up and down versus like a measly 32. And this is with very ergonomic focused attachments on, right? As you can see from my choices here, I could make it worse depending on it, especially if I put like a bigger scope on it. I love that. I love that there's trade-offs between our light and medium counterparts. These two weapons, I think, are a great showing and symbolism of like where light and medium should more or less be focused. You get the benefits of better ergonomics, better fire rate, and maybe better damage per second. But then if you really want medium pen to make it easier for you to have a little more utility, to take out a tank from behind, or as the light pen weapon can't, you then go medium pen. A little bit harder to handle, but at the same time, it's easier maybe to fit into your loadout because it's just more wide reaching. But like, you could easily just bring the amendment and then have a support weapon that deals with the medium pen, or bring a sidearm that deals with the medium pen. I love that idea as like building your crafting of your like loadout. I love that. I don't think all weapons just need to do medium pen or anything like that. I think that is like so much of an overexaggeration. I think light pen can exist, and it can exist in its current form. They just need to be more like this, more like the amendment versus diligence counter sniper. I think it is a fantastic example, and I hope they can do that for more weapons, because currently there's quite a few light pen weapons that just don't feel like they have that. And especially when we're looking at like a lot of the submachine guns, like the only submachine gun that ends up having medium pen is one that's more like an AR than it is anything else. So yeah, I think it's like definitely something they need to keep looking into and iterating on. It's not dire, because I think the vast majority of weapons in the game actually feel quite good. That has been completely forgotten due to like power creep. We've just been buffing so many weapons that unfortunately some have fallen through the crack. But like if you scroll through this list, there are a lot of very capable weapons. Not all of them are S tier, and you know, there will be a hierarchy at times, but as long as it keeps like, you know, shuffling and moving and adjusting, I can be happy with that. And I think we're going in the right direction. Definitely are. Next one, headshot damage for your Helldiver. This is one that I've always had a problem with, and I've even expressed this quite a few times to the developers, even when I was in Stockholm face to face with them. Headshot multipliers in a PvE game obviously make a lot of sense for the enemy, but for you to take increased damage, especially in the magnification that we do, can feel very bad often, especially against more ranged enemies. I see a lot of people talk about Illuminate, especially the elevated overseer. Their weapon tends to be very good at headshotting us because they're elevated and they're shooting down at us a lot of time, and they have a weapon that is pretty accurate. So there are a lot of instances where you can just like fall over dead in half a second because they got accurate. Or you could have like long stretches of 5 minutes where they just miss all their shots, or they hit you in the leg or the body or something like that, and it doesn't matter. But that random headshot where you're just like, that sucks, I wish it wasn't as impactful. I don't think we need to go to the extreme of like, let's say no headshot multiplier on Helldivers, but I do think that it needs to be more of a linear increase. Some time ago, I don't remember the exact patch notes, it was stated that headshot resistance will be based on 101 armor rating and higher, and then it scales upwards depending on how much armor rating you have. I really think that should be changed to 50 as the minimum, and then it just linearly scales up as you increase armor rating. Obviously, there's no stats on helmets, so it all depends on like your actual armor. And on top of that, maybe bringing down the headshot multiplier itself, I think it would make a lot of instances in the game just feel better. A big one that has been recently been brought up also is Dragonroaches. Sometimes you might notice you just instantly just die to Dragonroaches, and it's my understanding that because it's a very similar situation of they're above you and they're shooting fire at you, the fire in this game is like a beam of damage and it's impacting your head, and if you don't have any like fire resistance, you could just fall over and die in like a half a second. But if you're wearing fire resistance, you all of a sudden at least have some mitigation versus that. This also happens with the Hulk Scorcher. This can happen with any projectile in the game. Even rockets have some amount of impact damage that will impact your head and do more damage, so you can just instantly just fall over if it hits your head. If this was addressed, I think some of those like random deaths out of nowhere could easily be resolved and be less frustrating. And if they need to compensate in the other direction of just making us a little bit squishier overall, I'd be fine with that. I'm sure many in the comments will agree that like just randomly falling over this game isn't always fun, especially when you just take like a crazy amount of damage to the head randomly. It can lead to some very frustrating moments. Okay, a next one is enemies having weird interactions with like host versus non-host. We have quite a few of them in the game, some that have been brought up to me and I didn't even realize. Brood Commanders, this one's been around since Alpha Brood Commanders were basically added. Well, I think at one point they weren't doing this, but then they were randomly. I don't know when exactly it altered, but basically Brood Commanders, if you're the host, will spawn 3 enemies and they'll run at you, usually Alpha Warriors. But if you're not the host, they'll just look at you, turn around and run away. It's very unbalanced in that regard. Predator Hunters are another one. They used to spit at everyone when they hopped on you, but then a couple months after they just stopped and they only spit at the host. If you're the non-host, you don't get punished by this. And I'm sure some people are cheering because yay, hunters are not, you know, destroying me, but at the same time, it just feels grossly like unfair for the host. There's been discussion about chargers having way better tracking if they're the host. This one's a little bit unconclusive. I do notice that sometimes when I'm not the host and I just randomly join a game, immediately the charger is like doing circles with me. He's like a drift king. I feel like that one is just maybe just like chargers just need to be tuned a little bit differently, not have such a crazy turning circle, because it can be kind of ridiculous when you're like, you know, you have to turn with them as they're turning to not get hit because they can literally do a 90-degree turn on you. It's kind of crazy. But yeah, just like things like that need to be addressed a bit better. I think flesh mobs are another one that people bring up, and I would agree. The hitboxes on flesh mobs can sometimes be very unfair looking, especially if you're not the host, because of desync. Maybe a similar issue to the Rupture strain. Not sure exactly. But I think that is something that like has been largely kind of avoided. Definitely needs to be addressed going forward. The next one, devs explaining and just discussing things with the community. I'm going to talk about Destiny for a second because I used to play a lot of it, and I don't maybe agree with everything that's happening in Destiny, but one thing that Bungie has done very well over the years is talking to the community and explaining their thought process on decisions. And I find that reduces the toxicity level of the community when you can at least kind of like reason with the developer and just like disagree with them on like that level. I find there's a lot of toxicity whenever Arrowhead decides to do something at the moment. And if they don't describe why, there's just this outpour of rage and rhetoric and just so much anger. But I feel like it can be reduced so much, at least get to the point where there could be a discussion that can happen if they could explain themselves. So if they can include like just little blurbs under a particular like patch note of why you decided to do this, I think it would help a lot with just like general sentiment towards changes in the community. I'm constantly feel like I need to do that on behalf because I, you know, have like some amount of discourse with developers, or just like I play a little bit of like a, hey guys, let's take a second here and maybe this is where they were coming from when they made this decision. But I don't feel like I should have to. I feel like the developers need to kind of just explain what their thought process was. And I think it would go so far as to helping them navigate the Discords and the Reddits threads and so on and so forth. It would help so much, I think. And then it would open up the dialogue of like, you know, proper discussion, which could help them better understand us instead of them not going on Discord and just seeing insane amounts of rage after something has changed. Next one, samples. This one is definitely one that's been around for a bit. Samples being capped. It's more of a late game issue, obviously, than it is an early game. There's still a lot of people that are still going through their samples, I'm sure. But for most people probably watching this video, you're probably maxed out on samples and have nothing to spend them on. The DSS was a band-aid, and I think it's decent, community pulling things together. Would still like to see those DSS changes that, you know, they talked about some time ago. But there needs to be something more. There needs to be something to spend samples on. Deep Rock Galactic style, where you buy a beer and then you get a buff. In this game, it would probably be like maybe an additional booster, or like a weekly rotating stratagem that you spend samples towards as a team, and then you get access to that, or a limited amount of it. There needs to be something to spend samples on, because as someone who has 3,000 plus hours in the game, I basically only pick up samples if I notice my teammates are level 100 or less. You know, level 80, I'll start picking up samples to help them out with their sample grind. But that sucks. I want to be like picking up samples and still care about, oh damn, I died over there and I want to get my samples. That just doesn't happen at the moment, and there needs to be something, even like cosmetic related. And that brings me into my next point, is customization for Helldivers. Currently, we have extremely limited amounts of customization, basically through our helmet, cape, and then like emotes, essentially. I would love for them to add some kind of at least shading system to the game so you can change the color of some of our armor. There's a lot of discussion back and forth about transmog. Do I think Helldivers 2 needs to have the same transmog system as every other game that you think of? Maybe not, because that's ultimately, you know, they have an art direction and an idea of how they want their game to look and play, and some amount of customization could at least bring us somewhere in the middle. And then maybe in the future we get some amount of like, hey, if I put on this armor because I like the look of it, but I want the medic perk, maybe you put some like medic patches on it or something like that to make it medic looking, to keep the cosmetic of it's medic armor. We need something, and it shouldn't just be on the shoulders of modders to add customization to Helldivers. There needs to be something a little bit more, because people are so thirsty for it. It's like probably the most requested thing that they haven't added at this point that I just see constantly. And at least meeting us halfway in the middle of like having some amount of color customization similar to like our mechs and our other vehicles and our help pods, I think would be big. Last one, as far as my like needs to be addressed but not dire, would be storylines. As far as the MO, we get a lot of filler MOs, which is fine, but there are these big culminating MOs every once in a while that don't kind of lead anywhere. I'm looking at you, Cyberstan. It's been a long time since we've made any progress in that situation. I assume there needs to be development in the background, and that might be the next major one. We now have Illuminate have had bugs, and maybe Cyberstan is next, but we've just kind of made no progress on it. And before this, it was Gloom. Gloom sat idle for a very long time after being introduced. I just like to see more. It doesn't have to be predictable, and I think to some extent it is kind of nice that it's unpredictable, because you never know what's going to happen next with the story. I like that, but there's just some dead threads as far as like the narrative direction goes, that you're sometimes just like, well, what happened to Cyberstan? Are we just not caring about Cyberstan anymore? We're attacking all these like mining outposts and stuff like that, but like, why can't we just go to Cyberstan? Or why are we not like pursuing that more? It's just, I like more of that, I guess. I'm not sure. I'm not a massive lore enjoyer. I'm probably like most people that I read them, I participate in it, but I don't don't know the intricacies and know every dispatch that has ever been said, I don't remember everything. So at least from my perspective, I'm just like, well, some of these storylines have just gone nowhere, or it takes awfully long time to see any progression in them, which can sometimes leave us like, what happened? Just confused. Okay, this next part of the video, I will be talking about the dire systems and issues that I see both myself getting frustrated over, but also in my chat and just elsewhere in the community. I can echo them because I want to make them louder. First one I want to talk about is like stability of the game and just tech debt in general. There's a lot of frustration and this builds over time. I totally get that they've added so much to this game. Like over the course of the last like 2 years, they've like multiplied the amount of content in this game. Like literally multiplied. Many games have not done that. Usually there's like DLC that's added over time for games, but not to like this level in a way, especially one that like you can just essentially play for free. Totally. It's very impressive, but that impressiveness definitely gets drowned away when a lot of tech debt just continuously piles up. And I'm sure I am speaking for myself, but also I'm sure for many in the comment section of if they just slow down a little bit to make sure that we don't have the unjust situation, because it was so unfortunate having such a great update. I absolutely love the unjust update. I gave it like a 9 out of 10, but I had to put the caveat of, I'm sorry if you're running into issues. Personally, I didn't have any issues. Like performance was the exact same, if not a little bit better than previously before the patch, and I had no crashing issues, but I had countless people coming into my chat and I was trying to help them troubleshoot, and it's just like, it shouldn't be to this level. And it's really unfortunate. I know they put so much effort into it, and it's before someone says they don't do any QA, that is not the case. They do a lot of QA, but it's just like, I feel like they're just moving too fast and they don't always have enough time to implement all these fixes, and it's just like they're putting out fires afterwards. And I get it, it's a live service game, you know, we gotta update as fast as possible and something's gonna break along the way, but if you go too fast, there's so much frustration that builds up over time. And there still is. If you are experiencing a lot of performance issues on PC and it's not related to the audio bug, I'll explain the audio bug after this, delete your shader cache. You'll be surprised how much problems can be resolved by just deleting your shader cache. It's probably the number one thing that I say in my chat. I say it like 100 times a stream to people who come in. You can just Google it, delete your H2G shader cache. It'll be in a different location if you're using DirectX 11, just a heads up, but you can just put that into Google, you'll find it. The second thing, the audio bug that's been in the game for about a month now. If you've noticed your audio cutting out randomly, it's like the start of the bug. It just continuously gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And eventually you'll be locking up for seconds at a time. So your system will probably end up crashing. If that's happening to you, restart your game. It seems to be mostly happening on the bot front and for mega cities. On average on my PC, I have to restart my game every 2 to 3 games in order to keep playing without crashing or having that audio bug happen. If I'm on open maps, like without the mega cities, I don't get the issue nearly as much or at all. Maybe after like 6 hours of gameplay or something like that. But we shouldn't have to delete our shader cache. We shouldn't have to restart our game constantly. And these kind of things are like dire. They absolutely frustrate people when they just cannot play. The best thing I can tell them is try and do these troubleshootings or take a break, but like that just can't be the case. It can't be happening for over a month. It needs to be addressed faster. And I know it's hard, but like it needs to be addressed faster. Okay, next, getting into enemy design. More recently, there's been a lot of enemies that have been added to the game, and I think under the guise of more difficulty, but a lot of it has been added and it feels very unfair and it's just unfun levels of difficulty. I'm looking at you, Dragonroach Fire. I'm looking at you, Rupture Warrior. I'm looking at you, Fleshmob to some extent. I'm looking at you, Leviathan. And there's been tuning that has happened on the ladder, right? Especially for the Leviathans, there's been many changes, but it's this general ethos of we're adding enemies that have undodgeable attacks, are incredibly hard to kill at times from a solo perspective. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But then also some of it is just like unfair, just like straight up unfair. Like the Rupture Warrior is a great example of that, where the enemy was just unfair. If you didn't have an explosive weapon or just an extreme amount of mobility, that enemy was going to pounce out of the ground and hit you with incredible accuracy. At least prior to the bug fix, 3 players didn't have to really deal with that. It was much more fair of like they would jump out and possibly attack you, but you could at least like sidestep it or like dive out of the way. It felt a lot more fair. Unfortunately, that hotfix came through and the tuning for the Rupture Warrior seems like it's 5 weeks out. The timing on that just wasn't good. That bug fix just should have never gone through and just left it the way it is, because at least we could have said, if you're the host, be careful. The 3 other players are at least having fun. When it comes to Dragonroaches, they're fire, and the fact that their wings aren't a breakable part, I will echo that. I've seen that a lot of discussed. When I discovered the wings weren't actually a weak point after like dumping 20 rounds of airburst flak into it, I was very disappointed. I will say I was very disappointed. I was surprised, and it genuinely should be. The fire we've already kind of discussed, but in general just shouldn't track that well. It shouldn't track that heavily on you as a Helldiver. You should have more outplay. One of the best enemies they've added that kind of reminds me of the Dragonroach is the Stingray. The Stingray, the Interloper, whatever you want to call it, over on the Illuminate front, fantastic. Love that enemy. Very killable with the vast majority of weapons, telegraphed attack, very deadly. If you're not paying attention, it will smite you, especially when there's more than one around. But it's like very obvious when it's like going for you, and there's like very clear ways of dodging it, and it's like a skill check, and it's like very fair. It's a fair level of difficulty in my opinion. Whereas the Dragonroach, there's no inclination other than the fact that I'm staring at him that he's about to come dive, and like 9 out of 10 times you're probably still gonna get lit on fire if you don't have some extreme amounts of mobility to perpendicularly strafe it. And then when he starts hovering in front of you, that fire is almost like impossible to dodge unless you're quite distant away, because there's some travel time, which doesn't happen very often. So basically the strategy ends up being be in a mech and kill them, or bring lots of like weapons that can just deal with them extremely fast, so they don't have time to -1 stim, -1 stim, -1 stim. Next, going to Leviathans, I think the tuning on them has been good and successful, but I still feel like the biggest mistake for Leviathans was the fact that they're on open map. They probably should have never been on an open map. They seem suited for the high skyscraper, like you have lots of line of sight to like dodge them and hide from them and stuff like that. But on the open maps, you have like next to no visual, like vertical cover, so you just get pelted by them. It's nice that they have less overall like accuracy, and just like they don't ragdoll you anymore, and you at least have a spotlight so you know they're aiming at you, and you can destroy the cannons, and they have less range, which is all great. But you still have an issue of, if the team ignores them, occasionally they will still annoy the team. And that sounds weird, but it's an issue of, because there's no reason to kill them, they just fly off in random directions. They're not like a Bile Titan where you have to kill them. They're not like a enemy that you have to worry about in that regard. And there's no side objective to get XP like a Hive Worm. So you just kind of like avoid them, but then randomly they'll fly over top and you're just annoyed the entire time. And then you get randomly one shot, which sucks. It feels terrible. My Leviathan has shown up. So with Leviathans, I feel like there should be a side objective. It literally should be a side objective for Illuminate to kill the Leviathans, or many of them, to reduce that strain. Probably reducing the count more so on Illuminate missions would be nice, but like providing XP or some reason to kill them, I think would genuinely make them a lot less annoying, because people would actually try to kill them. Another one is like changing the weapon, so they're like lasers or something other than that, a very annoying one-shot cannon. I love the idea of Leviathans, but they just, right now they're bugged. If you didn't know, they're just not spawning at all, even if you pick a Leviathan mission. I tried to test solo silo versus them, and I sat there for 10 minutes and no one spawned, which is pretty crazy, which I thought was kind of funny. That's one way to nerf them. So next, going into Fleshmobs, this one I personally does not bother me nearly as much as other people, but I will try to bring up their concerns in this segment. I will not lie, I was disappointed in the fact that Fleshmobs did not have a leg as a weak point. I thought that was very odd. They have these small stubby legs. It just feels very fitting and natural. I don't quite get that one. At least being a mobility kill and doesn't necessarily kill them would be huge. Like more so than like the Hulk, for instance. Like they start rolling around the ground and they like maybe could hit you and ragdoll you, but like for the most part, they're dead effectively, and maybe they bleed out over time. I think that would help a lot. A lot of people have a problem with how bullet spongy they are. Personally, I kind of like that, because there are a lot of weapons that don't make them feel bullet spongy. Specifically, explosive weapons or fire weapons do a great job in making them not feel super tanky, in my opinion. And they do add like some amount of like variability in terms of like your loadout. Because Illuminate are a faction that require no anti-tank, Fleshmobs end up being the anti-tank enemy that I think about when making my loadout. Like when I go into a bot or bug mission, I often have to think about, okay, somewhere in my loadout I want to bring anti-tank in case I run into, you know, a charger or a bottle titan or a tank or something like that. I do that on Illumina missions, but not for any of the other units, but it's literally just the Fleshmob. And I don't mind that necessarily. I just put somewhere in my loadout, I might put a crisper on. I might put the eruptor or crossbow. I might put the flamethrower on. I might put gas grenades on just to CC them for my teammates to kill them. I might put the grenade launcher on. And then elsewhere in my loadout, I'm dealing with the other things. I like that they make for interesting choices. They are probably too balanced in a way that like make like normal weapons feel too bad. So adding the leg weak point would probably address that issue while keeping them interesting. No enemy should be like essentially like feel terrible to use like certain weapon types against unless it's like a very niche weapon. But like if you bring the right weapon, they should fall over, which does happen at the moment. It's just you bring the wrong weapon, flesh mobs feel like they will tank way too much time and just effort, and they can be very annoying to fight because they knock you around. If they don't kill you like a charger, they can be very annoying to fight, especially when there's like lots of other enemies, you know, pelting you. The last enemy that I really want to address is horse riders. That was added not too long ago as our new automaton enemy, but this one is more so ragdoll fatigue. This is a term that I focused on within the first like 200 or 300 hours of like playing Helldivers like a year and a half ago. We're at 3,500 and I still feel it. There are definitely moments of the game where I have this fatigue of I've been ragdolled too often, too much in sometimes important scenarios where it's just frustrating. And I like ragdoll. I like that it's like in the game and I don't want it to be removed or anything like that. It's just there's a lot of instances where it happens far too often, and Worst Riders at the moment are like by far the biggest culprit of this. They both have the grenades that are infinite. They will fire them out as many times as they want, and they're laser cannon. And they swap between the two fire modes incredibly quickly. So as you're dodging the grenade barrage, they're already queuing up their laser cannon. And if you're trying to use something that has like a longer TTK, like, you know, heavy machine gun or something like that, or you're trying to use a quasar or like an epoch, very often you won't have enough time to not get ragdolled or like be forced to move before it happens. And then it only gets worse if there's more than one, and there's often more than one. So I really hope that they can look at that enemy and just give them the rocket devastator side where like maybe they only have 2 barrages of grenades or something like that, or just please remove the ragdoll from basically like a super high velocity thing. Like I can easily say like bunker turrets are the same way. There's like no dodging bunker turrets half the time. Even if you're perpendicularly running at like full speed, they will easily continue to hit you. I like that they're less accurate, but it's the same kind of issue. You have this projectile that is so fast and very hard to dodge. And even if it misses, very often it'll still ragdoll you because it exploded next to you. That's not okay. We need to look at that kind of stuff. There's certain weapon archetypes that are just not fun to fight against and are just like overtuned as far as like frustration levels. And then one last point for the Worst Rider. This one less so, probably belongs in more of the problem but not dire, is Worst Riders should receive that radiator at the back of the butt as an actual medium pen weak point. It seemed very odd even when I first was playing against them that they had no medium pen. That's kind of like the point of automatons, that they usually have like some kind of precision shot or flanking shot to do. And at the moment, their only like actual weak point is their legs. And even then, they're not really a true weak point because they still require heavy pen. So requiring like medium pen if you get behind them, or like the eye, maybe that's a little bit cliche. I do like the lore explanation of maybe like the bots are learning that their red eyes are their weak points and we're all just shooting them. It's an ongoing war, so they're adapting maybe. But anyways, Worst Riders just need some tuning, man. They are so frustrating to play against. Going forward, I think there's like a lot of those like little things that like just stack up on top of each other, like, you know, little minor points of like, you know, the incendiary troops maybe require a bit too much in the way of actually needing anti-inflammable armor, if that makes sense. This last point is like kind of like just a conclusion of the overall video. I just want to conclude with like, I love the game. And I think a lot of people that are, you know, currently critiquing and just discussing this stuff love the game as well. I am a bit worried of people burning out on the game. I'm definitely running into a lot of people when we're having discussions on stream or just watching content on YouTube of like a lot of burnout. Gamers are sounding burnt out. And I think it will lead to sometimes things coming across as more extreme. Absolutely, like some of the issues with like enemies and technical issues need to be addressed. But there's lots of things that are like way less drier that I am worried that like people are like pointing out and are just like so burnt out. They're like expanding them into like huge issues. And we're just like forgetting why we like the game because we're just getting burnt out and jaded. If you feel like you're getting burnt out and the game is just unfun, I highly recommend just taking a break. Helldivers is a fantastic game to take a break from just because it's very easy to jump back in and start enjoying again when the next Warbond or the next big patch comes out. I don't want to see people burn out and then just hate the game and hate on the game super hard and then never come back. Sometimes like part of my stream is just like, you know, burnout awareness on stream, and it's just like bringing up the point of like what's an identifying factor of burnout and when should we like start reacting to it and stuff like that. Because like I was once there with like Destiny and other games where I just played them way too much and I wanted the game to be catered exactly for my play style, and when it wasn't done and it was actually being catered for a different type of play style, I got incredibly angry and frustrated, and I took it out on the game and I just continued playing instead of just being like more accepting of just like, unfortunately, not all elements of the game are going to be designed necessarily just for me, and some elements might be designed for a different type of player or just the wide scope of the game rather than that small section or niche. Because it can be very easy to provide feedback. It seems obvious for us to have more fun, but that same fun might not be fun for everybody, right? They need to kind of keep an eye on everything. I know people are gonna hear that and be like, but on their website they say this game is, they design a game for everybody is a game for no one. But let's be honest, a lot of the changes that they made in the last year and a half was more in line with a game for everyone, as far as like making the game more power fantasy oriented and stuff like that, in my impression of like changes being made. There is a balance, right? You can't just say a game for everybody is a game for no one. It's not that extreme. I love the philosophy of it, of like finding that, but it goes both ways. And sometimes you might be on that other side of asking for something or demanding something, and you might be in more of a niche of the community in that regard. And it's really hard to determine that where you lie because it's just such a big community. So yeah, I hope that better communication with the developers can lead to better discussions and understanding, so it's just not so vile and toxic, because it gets way too toxic, guys, on Discord and Reddit sometimes. It is insane. I get it. We're all passionate. We love the game. But guys, I think there's a time and a place, and we're going so much farther. So anyways, let me know in the comments down below if there's anything you feel like I missed. Definitely, I'm doing this as far as like a kind of like a one take, so I'm sure I missed something here and there. Feel free to come by the streams over on Twitch and hopefully YouTube. I'll be getting the second channel up for my YouTube live streams fairly soon. Consider leaving a like on the video if you liked it, subscribing for more content. We definitely have more tier lists and more build discussion videos and stuff like that coming out in the future. So stay tuned for that. Discord link down below. Much love, YouTube. Have a good one. Bye.